Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're looking into a cold case, one that's really been overshadowed for, gosh, almost 50 years by just one very notorious name. Our mission here is to kind of deconstruct the disappearance of Nancy Baird. It's a case where, well, the shadow of a famous serial killer just grew so large, so dense, it basically hid the real leads, the specific leads that were actually there right from the start back in 1975.
Yeah, it's a tough one. Nancy was 23 years old, a single mom working at a Feeney gas station in East Layton, Utah. She vanished on the afternoon of July 4th, 1975.
Independence Day.
Right, Independence Day. You'd think a busy highway, lots of people around, high visibility, but she just disappeared quickly, completely. We've been going through stacks of sources, and what they show is how this early, almost convenient assumption, we're calling it the Bundy effect, it pretty much paralyzed this investigation for nearly 5 decades and let two really, really important leads just sort of wither away. And the tragedy really starts with who Nancy was. You have to understand that.
Yeah.
She was recently divorced, yes, but totally dedicated to her 4-year-old son, supporting him. Every source we looked at confirms it. She would not have just left. Voluntary disappearance. Unthinkable.
Absolutely. A responsible young mother vanishing from her job, leaving behind her paycheck, her car, everything.
Yeah, it immediately signaled, something bad, a swift, forced abduction.
And the scene at the Fina station really backed that up. It clearly wasn't a simple robbery.
No way.
Her car was still in the lot. Her purse left behind the counter. And it had a lot of cash in it, right? Like weeks of her wages.
Yeah, a significant amount. And even the money in the register was still there.
So all the signs pointed away from money.
Exactly. It pointed to her being the target. A very targeted, bold, and incredibly fast removal from that station.
The timing is just crucial here, isn't it? It really emphasizes how bold this was.
Oh, absolutely. And it's why those eyewitness accounts are so critical. Nancy was last confirmed seen by a patrol officer just before 5:1 p.m. at the Fina station.
Okay.
By 5:30 p.m., she was gone.
Wow. 15 minutes. That's nothing.
15 minutes on a busy holiday right next to a highway. Whoever did this was, well, confident and fast.
Before we dive deeper into the leads, let's quickly touch on Nancy herself, her description, because some of this was never recovered.
Right. Good point. She was petite, maybe 5'2", 5'3", weighed about 100 pounds. She had very distinctive hair, long, reddish auburn, sometimes called strawberry blonde.
Okay.
But the key thing, the piece of evidence that's never turned up, is this unique ring, a small gold pinky ring. It had a main ruby flanked by 2 smaller rubies on each side.
A very specific description.
Very specific. If that ring ever surfaces, well, that could potentially solve the case right there.
Okay, let's unpack this. So right after she disappeared, July 5th, the leads started coming in. And they pointed away from just one person acting alone, didn't they?
They absolutely did. The most specific accounts came from the Williams children, 2 young kids. They were actually inside the store, and they saw 2 men talking to Nancy around 5:10 p.m.
5:10, so just minutes before that 5.15 sighting by the officer, or right around then.
Exactly, right in that critical window.
And these weren't just quick glances, right? The kids gave pretty good descriptions.
Incredibly detailed, actually. Good enough for composite sketches to be made and circulated. Subject number 1, they called him a hippie type, described as skinny, beard, mustache, shoulder-length hair, wearing a frayed denim jacket.
Okay, that's pretty specific for a witness description. What about the second guy?
Subject number 2 also had a beard and mustache, but his hair was shorter, more ear length, and he was wearing a yellow long-sleeve shirt.
2 men, distinct descriptions, inside the store, talking to her right before she vanished.
Yeah, that should have been a huge starting point for the investigation, a massive lead.
But incredibly, that wasn't even the most, well, alarming lead they got in those first few hours.
No, it wasn't. You're probably thinking about the incident Dolores Drake reported.
Yeah, the threat that happened just, 48 hours before?
Precisely, July 2nd. 2 nights before Nancy disappeared. Her friend, Dolores Drake, reported something really frightening. A man, known only as Tom, driving a yellow Volkswagen, maybe a van, the description varied slightly, had apparently stalked Nancy.
Stalked her?
Followed her persistently late at night. Eventually tailed her all the way to Drake's house around 2:30 in the morning. And Drake herself witnessed this Tom making a direct, quote, threatening comment towards Nancy right as she dropped her off.
Okay, wait. So you have a name, Tom, a specific vehicle description, yellow VW or van, and a direct witnessed verbal threat 2 days before she's abducted. That's practically screaming for attention, isn't it?
It absolutely should have been priority number 1 in 1975. Standard procedure, right?
Yeah.
You prioritize recent known threats against the victim.
You'd think so.
But the sources, the files that have surfaced more recently, they paint a different picture. It suggests this critical lead, this named, threatening guy, Tom. He just wasn't significantly pursued.
So, they had a name, a car, a recent threat, plus 2 other guys seen with her minutes before she vanished.
Yeah.
And somehow, these didn't connect, or they weren't followed up on effectively.
It seems that way. This lack of follow-through, this sort of investigative vacuum on the initial actionable stuff, that's exactly the space where this other, more convenient theory rushed in to fill the void.
Right. And here's where it gets, as you said, really interesting. Because that failure basically opened the door for one single name to dominate this case for decades.
Ted Bundy.
Ted Bundy.
And you can see why, at the time, the circumstantial links felt strong enough to maybe short-circuit deeper digging.
Yeah.
First, you have the timing and the geography. Bundy was active in Utah that summer, 1975. He was terrorizing the area, grabbing women. And he got arrested just 6 weeks after Nancy vanished, only about 30 miles south of Layton.
Okay, so proximity and timing.
Yeah. And second, the victimology. Nancy fit the general profile, did she? Young, attractive woman, long hair.
She did.
So given his known crimes nearby around that time, it became, well, almost easy for law enforcement and the public, too, to just assume it must have been Bundy.
Like a default answer.
Exactly. It created this sort of gravitational pull towards him. It offered a neat explanation, maybe closed the file mentally.
Yeah.
And it erased the need to really track down some unknown guy named Tom or figure out who those 2 hippie types were.
But the more you actually dig into the specific evidence for this case, the less likely Bundy seems.
Right. The actual evidence starts to dismantle that theory pretty effectively.
What do the sources say about, say, his alibi and his own statements?
Okay, let's start with the physical evidence, or lack thereof, connecting him. Those composite sketches.
The ones of the 2 men in the store.
Yeah. They bear absolutely zero resemblance to Ted Bundy. None. That's a huge contradiction right off the bat.
Okay, that's big. What about the alibi you mentioned?
Well, investigative work, confirmed later, showed Bundy had a pretty solid alibi for July 4th, 1975. He was with his girlfriend at the time, Leslie Knudsen, at her family reunion.
Where was that?
In the Uinta Basin. That's over 100 miles away from the FENA station in Layton.
100 miles? On a holiday?
Yeah. As one investigator put it, it makes the abduction pretty difficult for him to have done both things on that day.
You'd think. Hard to drive that far, commit a quick high-risk abduction in broad daylight, dispose of a body, and get back without anyone noticing.
Seems very unlikely.
And then there are his denials. Now, this is tricky, right? Because Bundy was a notorious liar.
He absolutely was a pathological liar.
So why should we put any weight on his denial in this specific case, especially when he was confessing to other murders right before his execution? Wasn't that just more manipulation?
That's a really key point, and it requires some critical analysis of his behavior then in 1989. His whole strategy right before execution was using confessions of bargaining chips, trying to trade information to delay things.
Right, trying to stay alive.
Exactly. He was actively trying to clear the books, claiming responsibility for unsolved crimes across multiple states to gain time and maybe seem cooperative. But Detective Dennis Couch, who interviewed him then, confirmed that when Nancy Baird's name came up, Bundy seemed genuinely blank. He even asked, "Now, Nancy Baird, who's that?"
So his pattern was to claim murders.
Yes. His pattern at that point was to claim everything he possibly could. So his denial here, combined with his apparent lack of any details about her case, actually feels, well, compelling. It suggests he really wasn't involved.
Okay, so we have the denial from Bundy himself when he had motive to confess. We have a solid alibi placing him far away. And we have eyewitnesses describing 2 completely different men at the scene. This really highlights what we call the Bundy effect. It's profound, and it was really damaging to this case.
Absolutely. Once he became the convenient answer, the easy suspect,
Yeah.
sources confirm it, all efforts involving other persons of interest came to a halt. Just stopped.
Classic confirmation bias. Find an answer that fits, even loosely, and stop looking.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
It provided a simple narrative, but ultimately it was a massive distraction that paralyzed the investigation for decades.
And connecting this back, the real tragedy beyond Nancy's loss is that the best window to solve this case slammed shut while those initial leads were still fresh.
Right. The pressure maybe to close a high-profile case, especially during that period of intense fear about serial killers, it likely led to, well, an institutional failure to follow up properly on Tom and the 2 men.
Which brings us to where things stand now, or at least where the focus should be. The best hope for this case, it seems, lies entirely in ignoring that decades-long distraction and going right back to those original two avenues, the ones that got overshadowed.
Exactly. Avenue number one, Tom. The guy in the yellow VW or van. This is still, arguably, the most compelling early lead. You had stalking. You had a direct verbal threat witnessed by a friend just 48 hours before she vanished.
Yeah.
This person, this known recent aggressor, he was never definitively identified, located, or really interviewed in any meaningful way by that original team. We still need to know who was Tom.
And avenue number two.
Subjects number one and number two. The two men seen inside the Phoenix station by the Williams children minutes before Nancy disappeared.
Right, the hippie types.
Yes. Now, we know investigators did look into one possibility based on a photo found in Nancy's own album.
Okay.
But that specific person was cleared, had a verifiable alibi. The problem is, the actual two men described by the kids at the station, the ones from the composite sketches, they've never been positively identified and ruled out.
So they're still out there, potentially, unresolved, the last people confirmed seen talking to her.
Precisely. They remain crucial, unresolved figures.
We should probably briefly touch on one other name that sometimes comes up, though it seems more speculative. Kerry Hartman.
Yeah, that's worth mentioning for context. Hartman knew Nancy, apparently. He was later convicted as a serial rapist and was also a suspect in another disappearance, Cherie Warren.
So on the surface, maybe?
Maybe. But the link to Nancy Baird specifically came much later. It was from a jailhouse informant, a guy named William Babel. And Babel's information was later discredited by the FBI. He wasn't considered reliable.
So while Hartman is certainly a figure of interest in other cases and was dangerous, the specific tip connecting him to Nancy's case is pretty shaky, came from an unreliable source.
That's right. So the focus really needs to stay on those two solid leads from 1975. Tom and the two unidentified men at the station.
Now, what's fascinating is how the focus finally shifted back. It wasn't really an internal cold case unit breakthrough, was it?
No, not in the traditional sense, like finding new DNA. This shift was really driven by modern investigative journalism demanding transparency.
You're talking about the Cole ALD podcast.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Their team focused intensely on getting access to and analyzing those original 1975 case files. That was the watershed moment, really, around 2022.
They managed to get some of those files released.
Partial files, yeah, redacted. But files that had basically been locked away, hidden behind the Bundy narrative for decades. And their release officially confirmed the specific details we've been talking about. The Tom threat, the detailed descriptions of the hippie men from the eyewitnesses.
So the journalism forced the official story to confront the original evidence.
Pretty much. It directly challenged the narrative that it held for so long. It proved definitively that law enforcement back then had specific, actionable information that, for whatever reason, wasn't fully pursued. And that forced a reevaluation, pushing the focus away from Bundy and back to that primary source material.
It's a really powerful example of how external scrutiny, public attention, can sometimes resurrect a case that seemed permanently stalled.
And the case is still officially cold, but it is listed as active. It's in NAMOS, the National Missing and Unidentified Persons System. And there were efforts, as recently as 2022, to reevaluate potential DNA evidence, though the status on that is often pending or unclear in older cases.
So looking back, we're left with this dual tragedy, aren't we?
We really are. First, the unimaginable loss for Nancy's family, especially her son, who was just 4 years old and grew up without his mother. And second, this huge lost investigative opportunity. Decades wasted because focusing on the convenient alternative, Ted Bundy, seemed, well, easier maybe, more efficient perhaps, than chasing down a specific threat from a guy named Tom and two unidentified witnesses.
So what does this all mean, really? Where does it leave us?
Well, ironically, the case for Nancy Baird feels clearer now than it has in decades.
Because the distraction has been cleared away.
Exactly. Thanks entirely to efforts that challenge that established narrative, that comfortable story. The truth, or at least the path towards the truth, seems to have been there all along, just hiding in plain sight behind that famous headline.
The initial facts. The two men. The threat by Tom.
That's where the best hope still lies.
It's striking, too. We mentioned the physical crime scene. The Phoenix station itself is long gone, demolished years ago for highway expansion.
Right, the physical place isn't there anymore.
Yet the memory, the record of those two specific men and the man named Tom, they persist. They're vivid in the digital archives and those original files that were finally brought into the light. It makes you think, doesn't it? Maybe the longevity of a cold case now depends less on finding that one piece of physical evidence buried somewhere.
And more on the integrity of the record, the
Yeah.
digital narrative.
Yeah, and the willingness to critically review that narrative, even if it's uncomfortable. Consider how often a case might just stagnate because one theory, one name is just too easy, too convenient to accept. What original forgotten detail might you uncover if you started digging into the 1975 files yourself, instead of just accepting the common headline?